Story 1. The problem wasn't that she was standing in the locked building at 3 a.m. The problem was that I'd watched her funeral 2 weeks earlier. My name is Owen Garrett, and I've been working security at the Riverside Medical Archive facility in Portland, Oregon for the past 8 years. It's not glamorous work. Mostly I sit at a desk, monitor camera feeds, and do building rounds every 2 hours. The facility stores old medical records, paper files from hospitals that have gone digital, insurance documents, patient histories dating back to the 1950s. Everything's temperature controlled, organized by decade and facility, sealed in boxes on industrial shelving that runs 20 feet high in some sections. The pay is decent for overnight work. $17 an hour, full benefits, and the solitude suits me. I'm 42 years old, divorced, no kids. I like the quiet. Most nights I bring a thermos of coffee, listen to podcasts, and walk my rounds with a flashlight and clipboard. The building is 70,000 square feet of climate-controlled storage. I know every corner. I started this particular shift on October 9th, 2023 at 10 p.m., same as always. Autumn in Portland means cold rain and early darkness. I park my Toyota Tacoma in the employee lot, punched my code into the rear entrance keypad, and locked the heavy steel door behind me. The building has excellent security, reinforced doors, motion sensors in every zone, cameras covering all entry points and main corridors. Nobody gets in or out without me knowing. The facility is divided into sections. The main archive floor is a massive open warehouse space with rows of shelving. There's a small administrative wing with offices that haven't been used in years, a break room, 2 bathrooms, and my security station near the front lobby. My station has 6 monitors showing camera feeds, a logbook, a phone, and a small space heater that barely works. I settled in, logged my start time, and began my usual routine. First round at midnight. Everything normal. Temperature reading stable. All doors secure. No motion detected in any zone. I marked it in the logbook and returned to my desk. Jennifer Calloway had worked in the administrative wing until August 27, 2023. She was 29 years old, friendly, efficient. She'd come in during day shifts to process new acquisitions, boxes of records from closing medical practices, outdated files from hospital system mergers. We'd cross paths occasionally when I arrived for my shift and she was leaving. She always smiled, always said goodnight. On August 28th, she didn't come to work. I heard about it from the day shift security guard, Ramon, when I arrived that evening. Jennifer had been in a car accident on Highway 26 heading home the previous night, head-on collision with a pickup truck that crossed the median. She died at the scene. I went to her funeral on September 2nd. It was a Saturday, my day off. Her family held it at a church in Beaverton. I signed the book, sat in the back, and paid my respects. I hadn't known her well, but she'd been kind to me. That felt like enough reason to attend. The funeral was closed casket. I remember that detail clearly. 2 weeks and 5 days later, I saw her standing in the administrative wing at 3 a.m. Let me be precise about what happened, because precision matters when you're trying to convince yourself you haven't lost your mind. I was doing my 2 a.m. round. I'd left my station at 1:58, walked the perimeter of the main archive floor, checked the loading dock door, the emergency exits, the bathrooms. Everything secure. I was walking down the corridor toward the administrative wing when I saw light coming from under one of the office doors. Office 12. Jennifer's old office. The door was closed, but light, pale fluorescent light was visible in the gap beneath it. I stopped walking. Every office in that wing should be dark. Nobody's worked in there since Jennifer died. The fluorescents are on manual switches, not timers or motion sensors. I stood in the corridor for maybe 30 seconds, listening. No sound, no movement, just that strip of light under the door. I walked closer, my flashlight in my left hand, right hand on my radio. When I reached the door, I tried the handle. Locked. All the administrative offices lock automatically when closed. I have a master key on my belt, but I didn't use it immediately. Instead, I knocked. "Security," I said. "Anyone in there?" No response. I knocked again, louder. "This is building security. I need you to open the door. Nothing. I pulled my key ring, found the administrative master, and unlocked the door. I pushed it open slowly, flashlight raised. The fluorescent lights were on all 4 panels in the drop ceiling, humming quietly. The office looked exactly as I remembered it. Desk against the left wall, filing cabinets along the right, small bookshelf behind the desk. Jennifer's nameplate was still there, a simple metal holder with a printed card. Jennifer Calloway, Records Specialist. The office was empty. No person. No signs of disturbance. The desk was clean, no papers, no coffee cup, nothing. Just the wood surface and a small desk lamp that wasn't turned on. I stepped inside, checking behind the door, behind the filing cabinets. Nobody. The window overlooked the parking lot. Locked from the inside, no damage to the frame or glass. I walked to the desk, put my hand on the surface. Cool to the touch, nothing unusual. I checked the light switches by the door. All 4 were in the up position on. Someone had flipped them. Or they'd flipped themselves, which wasn't possible with manual switches. I turned them off, watched the fluorescence fade and die. The office went dark except for my flashlight beam. I backed out, locked the door, and stood in the corridor trying to rationalize what I'd just seen. Electrical fault. The switches were manual, not automated. Old wiring? The building was only 15 years old. Well maintained. Someone broke in? No signs of entry, no alarms triggered. Every door I'd checked was secure. I returned to my station and reviewed the camera footage. Camera 8 covers the administrative wing corridor. I rewound to 1:45 a.m. and watched at double speed. At 1:51 a.m., the light appeared under Office 12's door, just like that darkness, then light. No one entered the corridor. No one opened the door. The light simply turned on inside a locked, empty office. At 2:03 a.m., I appeared on camera, walking down the corridor toward the office. The footage showed me stopping, approaching the door, knocking, unlocking it, entering. The camera angle didn't show inside the office, just the corridor and the closed door. I watched myself emerge 2 minutes later, lock the door, and stand in the hallway looking confused. At 2:06 a.m., the light under the door went off when I hit the switches. I sat at my desk, drinking cold coffee, staring at the monitors. I logged the incident. 2 a.m. Found lights on in Office 12, Administrative Wing. No signs of entry or occupancy. Lights turned off, door secured. I didn't mention Jennifer. I didn't mention that it was her office. I told myself it was electrical. Old switches, power surge, something mundane. At 3 a.m., I started my next round. I walked the main archive floor first, then headed toward the administrative wing. The corridor was dark. I swept my flashlight across the doors as I walked. Office 10, Office 11, Office 12. Light under the door. I stopped walking. The fluorescents were on again. Pale light spilling into the corridor from under Jennifer's door. My heart rate increased. I could feel it in my chest, in my throat. I stood 15 feet from the door, flashlight beam steady on the wood surface, and I tried to think of any rational explanation. I couldn't. I walked closer, slowly. When I reached the door, I put my ear against it and listened. Nothing. No movement, no breathing, no sound, except the faint hum of fluorescent lights. I unlocked the door. I pushed it open. Jennifer Calloway was standing behind her desk, facing the filing cabinets, her back to me. I want to be very clear about what I saw. This was not a shadow, not a trick of light, not a half-glimpsed figure I could explain away later. This was a person, solid and three-dimensional, wearing a navy blue cardigan and gray slacks. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, brown with lighter highlights. She was reaching up toward one of the filing cabinet drawers, her right hand extended, fingers touching the metal handle. She wasn't moving. She was completely still, frozen in that reaching position like a paused video. I stood in the doorway. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I stared at her back, at the cardigan, at the ponytail, and my brain tried to process what I was seeing. Jennifer? I said. My voice sounded strange, hollow. She didn't respond, didn't turn around, didn't move at all. I took one step into the office. Jennifer, is that you? Nothing. She remained motionless, hand on the drawer handle, back to me. I took another step. I was maybe 6 feet from her now, close enough to see details. The cardigan had small buttons down the front. Her slacks had a crease down the center of each leg. Her shoes were black flats. I could see the edge of her jaw, her ear, a small silver earring. Jennifer, I went to your funeral. The words came out quiet, confused. She didn't react. I raised my flashlight, even though the fluorescents were already lighting the room. The beam hit her shoulders, her ponytail. She didn't cast a shadow on the filing cabinet. The light passed through her and hit the metal surface directly, as if she wasn't there to block it. That's when I understood. Intellectually, some part of my brain accepted what I was seeing. This was not Jennifer Calloway. This was something else, something wearing her shape. I took a step backward, toward the door. My heel hit the door frame. The sound was loud in the silence, a solid thunk of rubber on metal. Jennifer's head turned. Not her body, just her head. It rotated slowly, impossibly, until she was facing me, while her torso remained oriented toward the filing cabinets. The movement was wrong. Smooth and continuous, no stopping point where a human neck would reach its limit. Her head kept turning until her face was pointed directly at me. Her eyes were open. Her expression was neutral, almost peaceful. She looked exactly as I remembered. Her round face, small nose, thin lips. But her eyes didn't focus on me. They stared past me, through me, at something beyond the door. Her mouth opened. Owen! She said my name in her voice, Jennifer's voice. I recognized the slight upward inflection she used, the softness of the consonants. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed. My hand was shaking, the flashlight beam wobbling across her face. Owen, she said again, I need you to find something. Her body still hadn't moved, only her head, turned at that impossible angle, facing me, while her shoulders pointed at the filing cabinet. I can't rest, she continued. Her voice was flat, toneless despite the familiar inflection. Not until it's found. File 2317. Patient records from Mercy Hospital, 1978. There's a mistake. It needs to be corrected. I managed to breathe. A short, sharp inhale that sounded too loud. What mistake? I whispered. The name is wrong, she said. The birth date is wrong. Someone will be hurt if it isn't fixed. File 2317, Section G, row 42, please. Her head rotated back to its original position, the movement just as smooth and wrong as before. When she faced the filing cabinet again, she vanished. Not gradually, instantly. One moment she was there, solid and real. The next moment the space behind the desk was empty. The fluorescent lights stayed on. I stood in the doorway for a long time. Maybe 2 minutes, maybe 5. I stared at the empty office, at the filing cabinet, at the space where she'd been standing. My hands were shaking. My legs felt weak. Eventually, I backed into the corridor, pulled the door closed, and locked it. I didn't turn off the lights. I walked back to my station, sat down, and stared at the monitors. The camera footage showed me entering Office 12 at 3:02 a.m. It showed me standing in the doorway, then stepping inside, then backing out, and closing the door at 3:09 a.m. 7 minutes. The angle didn't show the interior of the office, just me, reacting to something the camera couldn't see. I picked up the phone and almost called Ramon, the day shift guard. I wanted to tell someone, to have another person confirm I wasn't insane. But I put the phone down. What would I say? I saw a ghost. I saw Jennifer Calloway, who we buried 2 weeks ago, and she asked me to find a file. Instead, I opened the facility database on my desktop computer. We have a digital inventory of every box, every file collection in the building. I searched for file 2317. It existed. Patient records from Mercy Hospital, Portland, Oregon. acquired in May 1999 when Mercy merged with Providence Health System. The files covered the years 1976 through 1982. According to the database, the file 2317 was located in Section G, Row 42, Shelf Level 3, exactly where Jennifer had said. I sat at my desk until 4 a.m. I didn't do another round. I watched the monitors, all 6 feeds, looking for any sign of movement, any flicker of light. Everything remained normal. The building was silent, empty. At 4:15, I stood up and walked to the main archive floor. Section G was in the northwest corner of the facility. Row 42 was deep in the stacks, surrounded by 20-foot-high industrial shelving units. I brought my flashlight and a rolling ladder. The boxes were labeled with reference numbers. I found box G4203, which according to my clipboard inventory contained files 2310 through 2325. I climbed the ladder to shelf level 3, pulled the box toward me, and carried it down. I set it on the floor, removed the lid, and started searching. The files were in manila folders, arranged numerically: 2315, 2316, 2317. I pulled file 2317. The label read, Morrison, Charlotte, Dobb, the 12th of April, 1962. Inside were medical records from Mercy Hospital, admission forms, treatment notes, discharge summaries. I flipped through the pages carefully. Most of it was routine: a broken arm in 1978, a minor surgery in 1980, standard childhood medical care. Then I found it, a birth certificate filed with the medical records. It listed Charlotte Morrison, born April 12, 1962, at Mercy Hospital, mother Linda Morrison, father Robert Morrison. But there was another document behind it, a second birth certificate, different form, different hospital seal. This one listed Charlotte Morrison, born April 12, 1962, at Good Samaritan Hospital, mother Linda Morrison, father unknown. 2 birth certificates. Same name, same birth date, different hospitals, different father information. I sat on the floor of the archive, file folder open in my lap, staring at the documents. One of them was wrong. Either Charlotte Morrison had been born at Mercy Hospital with Robert Morrison as her father, or she'd been born at Good Samaritan with no father listed. The distinction mattered. Birth certificates are legal documents. They determine inheritance, medical history, family connections. If someone was searching for their biological father and they had the wrong certificate, they'd never find him. If someone needed medical records based on paternal family history, they'd be looking at the wrong genetic information. Someone will be hurt if it isn't fixed. I took photos of both certificates with my phone, replaced the file in the box, returned the box to shelf level 3. I climbed down the ladder and walked back to my station. I didn't know what to do with the information. I couldn't exactly file an incident report saying a ghost told me to check a file and I found a documentation error. But Jennifer, or whatever I'd seen wearing Jennifer's shape, had been right. There was a mistake. A mistake that could matter. At 6 a.m. my shift ended. Ramon arrived at 5:55, cheerful and awake despite the early hour. I gave him the standard briefing. Building secure, no incidents, all systems normal. I didn't mention Office 12. I didn't mention Jennifer. I drove home in the dark, rain streaking my windshield, trying to process what had happened. I didn't sleep. I sat in my apartment, drinking coffee, staring at the photos on my phone. 2 birth certificates, same person, different information. At 2 p.m., I called the records department at Good Samaritan Hospital. I explained I was following up on a documentation discrepancy for a patient born in 1962. The woman I spoke to was patient and professional. She looked up Charlotte Morrison in their archives. Yes, we have a record of her birth, she said. April 12th, 1962. Mother Linda Morrison. Father unknown at time of birth. And you're certain about that? I asked. The record is clear, she said. Is there a problem? I thanked her and hung up. Then I called Mercy Hospital's records department. Different person, same question. Charlotte Morrison, born April 12, 1962. The clerk confirmed, but according to our records, she wasn't born here. The file we have is a transfer from Good Samaritan. It looks like someone misfiled a duplicate certificate with incorrect information. That happens sometimes with old paper records. So the correct certificate is the one from Good Samaritan? I asked. That would be my assessment, she said. The original birth hospital would have the accurate documentation. I hung up and sat in silence. Jennifer had been right. The file in our archive contained incorrect information, a duplicate certificate that listed the wrong hospital and wrong father. Someone searching that file would find the wrong details. If Charlotte Morrison or her descendants ever needed that information, they'd be misled. I went to work that night at 10 p.m. I logged in, started my shift, tried to focus on the normal routine, but I couldn't stop thinking about Office 12. At midnight, I did my first round. I avoided the administrative wing entirely, stayed on the main archive floor. At 2 a.m., I did my second round. I walked slowly toward the administrative corridor. When I reached the turn, I stopped and looked down the hallway. Light under the door of Office 12. I stood there, flashlight in hand, staring at that strip of pale fluorescence. I knew what I'd see if I opened that door. I knew she'd be there, standing at the filing cabinet, back turned, waiting. I walked toward the door. I unlocked it. I pushed it open. Jennifer was in the same position, reaching toward the filing cabinet drawer, frozen mid-motion. The fluorescent lights hummed quietly above us. I found it, I said. You were right. The certificate was wrong. She didn't move, didn't acknowledge me, just stood there, motionless. Jennifer, I found the mistake. File 2317. The birth certificate for Charlotte Morrison. It listed Mercy Hospital, but she was born at Good Samaritan. The father information was wrong. I confirmed it with both hospitals. Slowly, her head began to turn. The same impossible rotation, smooth and continuous, until she faced me. Her expression was peaceful. Her eyes looked through me, past me. Thank you, Owen, she said, in that flat, emotionless version of her voice. What do I do with this information? I asked. How do I fix it without explaining how I knew? The family will search soon, she said. Charlotte's daughter. She'll request the records in 3 weeks. Just correct the file before then. Remove the wrong certificate. That's all that's needed. How do you know someone will search for it? I asked. Because I can see what's coming, she said. Not everything, just the threads that matter. The daughter will search. If she finds the wrong information, she won't find her grandfather. She needs to find him before he dies. He has 6 months. Her head rotated back to face the filing cabinet. She vanished. The lights stayed on. I stood in the empty office, processing what she'd said. 3 weeks. Charlotte Morrison's daughter would request records. If I corrected the file now, removed the incorrect certificate, she'd find the right information. She'd locate her grandfather. She'd have 6 months with him before he died. I left the office, locked the door, turned off the lights from the corridor switch. I walked back to my station, pulled up the digital inventory, and made a note. File 23-17 requires documentation review. Duplicate certificate error identified. The next morning, I stayed late. When the administrative day staff arrived at 8 a.m., I spoke to Patricia, the records supervisor. I explained I'd been reviewing files during a routine inventory check and found a duplicate birth certificate in file 2317 with conflicting information. She thanked me, said she'd review it and correct the archive. 2 days later, Patricia sent me an email. File 23-17 corrected. Incorrect duplicate certificate removed and destroyed. Good catch. I didn't see Jennifer again that week. Office 12 remained dark during my rounds. The fluorescent lights stayed off. I began to think maybe it was over, that she'd gotten what she needed and moved on. But on October 23rd, at 3 a.m., the light appeared under the door again. I walked down the corridor, unlocked the office, pushed the door open. Jennifer stood at the filing cabinet. Same position, same cardigan, same ponytail. "Owen," she said, her head turning to face me. "Thank you for fixing the first mistake." "The first?" I asked quietly. "There are others," she said. "So many others. Files with wrong names, wrong dates, wrong information. People who will be hurt by the mistakes. People who won't find what they're searching for." "How many?" I asked. 47, she said. 47 files with errors that will matter. Errors that will break families, hide medical histories, lose inheritances. I can see them all. I can see what happens if they're not fixed. I stood in the doorway, looking at her impossible face, her eyes that stared through me. "Why you?" I asked. "Why are you the one who sees this?" "Because I died here," she said. "Not in this room. But my last thoughts were about this building, about the work I didn't finish, the files I meant to review. And when I died, I didn't leave. I stayed with the work." "That's not fair," I said. "You should be at rest. You shouldn't be trapped here." "I'm not trapped," she said softly. "I'm choosing to stay until the work is done, until the mistakes are fixed. Then I'll go." Her head turned back to the filing cabinet. She didn't vanish this time. She simply stood there, hand on the drawer handle, waiting. "File 1892, she said. "Section C, row 16. Wrong Social Security number. It matters in 8 months." Then she was gone. I found file 1892 the next day. She was right. The Social Security number on a 1967 medical intake form had been transcribed incorrectly, 2 digits transposed. I flagged it for Patricia. 3 nights later, Jennifer gave me another file number, then another, then another. This continued for 6 weeks. Every few nights, the light would appear under her door at 3 a.m. I'd open the door, she'd be standing there, and she'd give me a file number and location. I'd find the error, flag it, and Patricia would correct it. I stopped being afraid. Jennifer was methodical, patient, purposeful. She wasn't haunting me, she was working. The same work she'd done when she was alive, just continuing it after death. On December 4th, I opened her office door at 3 a.m. and found her standing in a different position. She was facing me this time, hands at her sides, expression calm. "That was the last one," she said. 47 files, all corrected. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now I leave," she said simply. "The work is done. Will you be okay?" The question felt absurd, but I meant it. "I'll be at rest," she said. "Thank you for helping me finish." "I should be thanking you," I said. "You were helping people. Families you'd never meet, people who would never know you saved them from years of searching, from losing connections they needed." She smiled. It was the first expression I had seen on her face, beyond neutral calm. A small, genuine smile. "Goodbye, Owen," she said. "Goodbye, Jennifer." She faded slowly this time. Not an instant disappearance, but a gradual dissolution, like morning fog burning off in sunlight. First her edges blurred, then her features softened, then she was translucent, then she was gone. The office was empty. The fluorescent lights hummed above me. I stood there for a long time, then turned off the lights, locked the door, and walked back to my station. I never saw her again. Patricia retired in March of 2024. Before she left, she sent me an email thanking me for my diligence in identifying file errors. "In 30 years of records management, I've never had a security guard catch this many significant documentation errors," she wrote. "You saved a lot of people a lot of trouble. Some of these mistakes could have had serious consequences for the families involved. I still work the night shift at Riverside Medical Archive. I still do my rounds at midnight, 2 a.m., 4 a.m., and 6 a.m. Office 12 stays dark now. The door stays locked. But sometimes, when I walk past it during my rounds, I think about Jennifer Calloway standing at that filing cabinet, hand on the drawer handle, finishing work that mattered. Here's what I learned. Not all hauntings are about terror. Some are about purpose. Some ghosts don't want to scare you. They want to finish what they started. They want to fix what's broken. They want to help, even after death. If you work night shifts in places where people care deeply about their work, pay attention to the small signs, lights that shouldn't be on, doors that shouldn't be unlocked, patterns that repeat without explanation. Sometimes it's just equipment failure or coincidence, but sometimes, rarely, but sometimes it's someone who stayed behind to finish one last job. And if they ask you to help, if they give you information that turns out to be accurate, if they show you mistakes that genuinely need fixing, help them. Because whatever keeps them here, whatever chain binds them to this world, maybe completing their work is what finally sets them free. I hope Jennifer found her rest. I hope the 47 families whose files we corrected never knew how close they came to losing vital information. I hope Charlotte Morrison's daughter found her grandfather in time. And I hope that if I die with work unfinished, someone will be patient enough to help me complete it. Story 2. I heard my grandfather's footsteps crossing the attic every night for 6 months. He'd been dead for 30 years, and the house had no attic. My name is Trevor Walsh, and in April of 2023, I inherited my grandfather's house in Corvallis, Oregon. The property sat on 4 acres outside town, a 2-story farmhouse built in 1928, white clapboard siding, covered front porch, detached garage that was half collapsed. My grandfather, William Walsh, had lived there alone from 1972 until his death in 1993. After he died, my father couldn't bring himself to sell it, so he kept paying property taxes and let it sit vacant for 3 decades. When my father passed away in March of 2023, I inherited both the house and the decision of what to do with it. I was 34 years old, working remotely as a software developer, recently divorced, living in a cramped apartment in Eugene. The idea of having space, land, a project to focus on it appealed to me. I drove out to see the property on April 7th. The house was in rough shape, peeling paint, sagging gutters, overgrown yard, but the bones were solid. The foundation was intact, the roof didn't leak, and the electrical panel had been updated sometime in the 80s. I decided to move in and renovate slowly while living there. I spent 2 weeks cleaning. I hauled out 30 years of dust, mouse nests, and debris. I scrubbed floors, washed windows, cleared the yard. On April 22nd, I moved in with my laptop, a mattress, some basic furniture, and tools. The house had a simple layout: downstairs, living room, kitchen, bathroom, and a small bedroom my grandfather had used as an office. Upstairs, 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. The ceilings were low, maybe 7.5 feet, with exposed beams in some rooms. The stairs creaked, the floorboards creaked, everything creaked. Old houses do that. What the house didn't have was an attic. The roof structure was built directly onto the second floor ceiling. I'd been up there during my initial inspection. The bedrooms upstairs had slanted ceilings that followed the roof line. There was no crawl space above, no attic access, no hidden third floor. Just roof, insulation, and ceiling. I mention this because it's important for understanding what happened later. The first night I slept in the house, April 22nd, 2023, I heard footsteps above me at 2:37 a.m. I was sleeping in the downstairs bedroom, the one my grandfather had used as an office. I'd set up my mattress on the floor, hung some blackout curtains, and tried to get comfortable. The house made normal settling noises all evening. Wood expanding and contracting, wind against the siding, branches scraping the roof. But at 2:37 a.m., I awoke to the distinct sound of footsteps crossing the ceiling above me. Not settling noises, not creaking. Footsteps. The deliberate, rhythmic sound of someone walking across a floor. Heavy steps, evenly spaced, moving from the front of the house toward the back. I could track the progress, step, pause, as if someone was walking slowly, carefully, directly above my bedroom. I lay in the dark, listening. The steps continued for maybe 20 seconds, reaching what would have been above the kitchen area, then stopped. Silence. I waited, barely breathing, but heard nothing else. I told myself it was the roof settling. Old wood, temperature changes, wind pressure. I'd read about that kind of thing. Houses make noise. I rolled over and eventually fell back asleep. The next night, April 23rd, The footsteps came again at 2:37 a.m., same pattern. Starting above the front of the house, walking slowly toward the back, stopping above the kitchen, 20 seconds of deliberate, measured steps. This time I got up. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and walked through the downstairs. Everything was still. I went upstairs, checked both bedrooms. Empty. No signs of animals. No damage to the ceiling. I stood in the hallway and looked up at the slanted ceiling that followed the roof line. No access panel. No attic. I went back to bed. The footsteps didn't return that night, but they came the next night and the night after, and every single night for the next 6 months at exactly 2:37 a.m. I would hear footsteps crossing the ceiling above my bedroom. The pattern never varied, always the same time, always the same route, front to back, above my bedroom and into the kitchen area. Always the same pace, slow, deliberate, heavy, always lasting about 20 seconds before stopping. I tried everything to rationalize it. I researched thermal expansion. I checked for animals in the walls. I climbed onto the roof and inspected for loose shingles or structural movement. I set up a decibel meter to measure the sounds. The meter confirmed what I was hearing, distinct impact noises consistent with footsteps, registering at 45 to 50 decibels, occurring in rhythmic intervals of approximately 1.2 seconds. Not settling, not animals, not wind, footsteps. I started sleeping upstairs in early May, thinking maybe the sound was being transmitted through the walls in a way that made it seem like it was overhead when it was actually somewhere else. But when I slept in the upstairs bedroom, I heard the same footsteps now coming from above me. Still the same time, same pattern, but now clearly originating from a space that definitionally didn't exist. I was hearing someone walk across an attic that the house didn't have. In late May, I mentioned it to my neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski. She was 78 years old, had lived on the adjacent property since the 1960s. She knew my grandfather. William was a creature of habit, she told me, over coffee on her porch. Every night, 2:30 in the morning, he'd get up and walk through the house, checking the doors, looking out the windows. He did it for years. I used to see his flashlight moving past the upstairs windows when I'd get up for the bathroom. Every night at 2:30? I asked. Like clockwork, she said. He was worried about break-ins after someone robbed the Muller place in '79. Started doing security checks every night. Never stopped, far as I know. The pattern I'm hearing, I said carefully, starts at the front of the house and moves toward the back. Would that match his route? She thought about it. He'd start in the front bedroom, that's where he slept, then walk through the hallway to the back bedroom, check the window, then go downstairs to check the kitchen door. Same pattern every night. The route matched exactly. Front bedroom to back bedroom to kitchen. The same path I was hearing every night, at the same time my grandfather used to walk it. Mrs. Kowalski, I said, did he die in the house? She shook her head. No, honey. He had a heart attack in town at the grocery store. Died at the hospital. Nobody was at the house when it happened. I thanked her and went home. I sat in the living room, trying to process the information. My grandfather had walked the same route every night for years, checking doors and windows. Now, 30 years after his death, I was hearing those same footsteps at the same time, following the same path. But the footsteps were coming from above the second floor, from a space that didn't exist. I decided to document it. I set up my phone to record audio every night, positioned on my nightstand. I wanted proof that I wasn't imagining this. The recordings confirmed everything. At 2:37 a.m., the footsteps appeared clearly on the audio-heavy rhythmic impacts moving across the ceiling. 20 seconds of steps, then silence. Every single night. I played the recording for my friend Alex when he visited in June. He's a structural engineer, skeptical and practical. I thought he'd find a rational explanation. He listened to the recording, then looked up at the ceiling. That sounds like footsteps, he said simply. I know, but you said the house doesn't have an attic. It doesn't. The roof structure sits directly on the second floor ceiling. There's no space between. He borrowed a ladder from my garage and went up to the roof with a measuring tape. He spent an hour checking roof pitch, measuring ceiling heights, calculating the structural gap between the upstairs ceiling and the roof exterior. When he came down, he looked confused. There's maybe 8 inches of space between the top of your ceiling joists and the underside of the roof decking, he said. That's just enough for insulation and minimal airflow. Nobody could walk through that space. Nothing could walk through that space. There's no room. So what's making the sound? I asked. I don't know, he admitted, but it's not footsteps in an attic, because there's no attic to walk through. After Alex left, I sat alone in the house and thought about my grandfather. I'd been 5 years old when he died. I barely remembered him, just vague impressions of a tall, quiet man who smelled like pipe tobacco and let me help him in the garden. My father had rarely talked about him. When I asked why we never visited the house after Grandpa died, my father would change the subject. There was something unspoken there, some tension I'd been too young to understand. I called my Aunt Linda in early July. She was my father's older sister, 72 years old, living in Seattle. I asked her about my grandfather. Dad was a hard man, she said, not cruel, but rigid. He had rules for everything, and he expected those rules to be followed. After Mom died in '68, he got worse, more isolated, more obsessive about the house and the property. Mrs. Kowalski said he did security checks every night, I said. That's putting it mildly, Linda replied. He was paranoid about intruders. He'd walk through the house at 2:30 every morning, checking every door, every window, every lock. He did it for 25 years, Trevor. Every single night, same time, same route. He couldn't sleep if he didn't do it. Did he think something was trying to get in? There was a long pause. He thought something was trying to get out, she said quietly. What do you mean? He never explained it clearly. But he'd say things sometimes, especially near the end, about keeping something contained, about making sure the foundation stayed solid, about how important it was to check the house every night because if he didn't, something would escape. Escape from where? I don't know. Your father thought Dad was developing dementia, but Dad was sharp until the day he died. He believed something was in that house that needed to be watched, and he watched it for 25 years. After I hung up, I went down to the basement for the first time in weeks. I'd been avoiding it. Old basements make me uncomfortable, and this one was particularly unpleasant. Dirt floor, stone foundation walls, exposed floor joists, a single bulb hanging from a wire, but I needed to check something. I walked slowly through the basement, examining the foundation. The walls were solid river stone and mortar, built when craftsmanship meant something. No cracks, no damage. I checked every corner, every section, looking for, I didn't know what, evidence, explanation. In the northeast corner I found something strange. A section of the dirt floor, maybe 3 feet by 3 feet, was different from the rest. The soil was darker, more compact, and it formed a perfect square, as if something had been buried there, and the earth had been carefully replaced. I knelt and touched the soil. It was cold, damp, firmer than the surrounding dirt. I brushed away the surface layer and found the soil underneath was even darker, almost black. Something was buried here. I was certain of it. I went upstairs, got a shovel from the garage, and came back down. I started digging. The soil was dense but not difficult. I dug down 6 inches, then 12, then 18. At about 2 feet deep, the shovel hit something solid. Not stone, something smoother. I cleared the dirt carefully with my hands. Wood. A wooden surface, flat and horizontal. I expanded the hole, revealing more. It was a wooden panel, roughly 3 feet square, set into the ground like a hatch or a cover. The wood was old but intact. No hinges. No handle. Just a flat panel, fitted precisely into a frame buried in the foundation floor. I tried to pry it up with the shovel. It wouldn't budge. I got a crowbar, worked it under the edge, and levered upward. The panel shifted slightly, then stopped. Something was holding it down. I crawled into the hole and examined the edges more carefully. There were metal brackets underneath, barely visible, securing the panel to the frame. Not locks, just brackets. But they were strong, and they were deliberate. Someone had sealed this hatch intentionally, permanently. I spent the next hour removing the brackets with a wrench and screwdriver. It was awkward work in the confined space, dirt falling into my eyes, my back aching from the cramped position. But eventually, I got the last bracket free. I climbed out of the hole, positioned the crowbar under the panel, and lifted. The wood groaned. Something underneath shifted. The panel came up slowly, releasing a smell of old earth and something else, something stale and organic, like a root cellar that had been sealed for decades. I propped the panel against the foundation wall and shined my flashlight into the hole. There was a space underneath. Not large, maybe 4 feet deep, but clearly intentional. The walls were lined with stone, creating a small chamber beneath the basement floor. The bottom was dirt, undisturbed. The chamber was empty except for one thing. A bundle wrapped in oilcloth, sitting in the center of the dirt floor. I stared at it for a long time before climbing down into the chamber. The space was just big enough for me to crouch. I picked up the bundle carefully. It was surprisingly light. I climbed back up to the basement floor and unwrapped the oilcloth. Inside was a leather journal, brittle with age, and a small wooden box. I opened the journal first. The handwriting was cramped and precise. The first entry was dated October 3rd, 1972, a few months after my grandfather moved into the house. The entry read, "It started 3 nights ago. Footsteps in the attic. Impossible, as the house has no attic. But I hear them clearly. 2:37 a.m. every night. The same path, front to back, above the bedroom. I've checked the roof structure. There's no space for anyone to walk, but the footsteps continue." I sat on the basement floor, reading by flashlight. My hands were shaking. My grandfather had heard the same footsteps I was hearing, starting in 1972, 51 years ago. I kept reading. Entry after entry documented the footsteps. Same time every night. Same route. My grandfather tried everything I'd tried, checking for animals, measuring the structure, recording the sounds. He reached the same conclusion. Someone was walking through a space that didn't exist. But his journal went further than my investigation had. On November 12, 1972, he wrote, "I've determined the footsteps originate from beneath the house, not above it. The sound travels through the structure in a way that makes it seem overhead, but the source is below. Something in the foundation. Something walking in a space that mirrors the house layout but exists underneath it." On December 1st, he wrote, "I've researched the property history. This land was a homestead in the 1800s. A family named Morrison lived here from 1876 to 1893. They built a house, not this house, but an earlier structure on the same foundation. That house burned in 1893. All 7 family members died in the fire. The current house was built in 1928 using the original foundation stones." On January 8th, 1973, he wrote, "The footsteps are not trying to scare me. They're patrol patterns. Someone checking doors and windows, just as I do. But they're checking from underneath, making sure nothing escapes from below, making sure the foundation holds. I've begun doing the same checks from above at the same time each night. If something is watching from below, someone should watch from above." The journal continued for years. My grandfather documented his nightly patrols, matching the pattern of the footsteps below. He wrote about feeling a presence in the house, not malevolent, but watchful, persistent, dedicated to some purpose that involved keeping the foundation secure. On March 19th, 1987, he wrote, "I understand now. The footsteps aren't haunting me. They're teaching me, showing me what needs to be done. This house sits on ground where people died protecting something, keeping something contained. That duty didn't end when they died. It continues. And now it's my responsibility too. I walk the same path they walk. I check the same points they check. We're both watching, both protecting. The final entry was dated September 7th, 1993, 6 days before my grandfather died. I've sealed this journal in the box beneath the basement floor. If someone inherits this house and hears the footsteps, they need to know you're not alone. You're not going crazy. Something walks beneath this house every night, checking the foundation, making sure it holds. Let it walk. Do your own patrols to match. Watch from above while it watches from below. Don't try to stop it. Don't try to remove it. Just maintain your vigil. That's the price of living here. That's the duty that comes with this land. I set down the journal and opened the small wooden box. Inside was a pocket watch, tarnished silver, stopped at 2:37. I sat in the basement until dawn, thinking about my grandfather walking through the house every night for 25 years, matching footsteps that came from beneath the foundation, maintaining a watch over something neither he nor I fully understood. When I finally climbed the stairs back to the first floor, I made a decision. I went to the bedroom, set an alarm for 2:35 a.m., and committed to something I hadn't done since moving in. I would walk the house. That night, at 2:35 a.m., my alarm woke me. I got up, grabbed a flashlight, and stood in the downstairs bedroom. At 2:37, the footsteps started above me. I began walking my own route through the downstairs hall, into the kitchen, checking the door locks, looking out the windows. As I walked, I could hear the footsteps above keeping pace with me. When I stopped at the kitchen door, the footsteps above stopped too. We stood in silence for a moment, me in the kitchen, the other presence somewhere in the impossible space above. Then the footsteps resumed, walking back toward the front of the house. I followed the same path in reverse, returning to the bedroom. The footsteps above ceased. I went back to bed. The next night I did it again, and the night after, and every night since. I've lived in my grandfather's house for 18 months now. Every night at 2:37 a.m. I wake up and walk my patrol. I check the doors, check the windows, make sure everything is secure. And every night I hear matching footsteps from the space above or below or wherever they truly originate. I've stopped trying to understand it completely. Some things don't have explanations that fit comfortably into our understanding of reality. But I've learned what my grandfather learned. This isn't about being haunted. This is about shared responsibility, shared vigilance. Something watches this house from beneath. Something that died protecting this ground and never stopped protecting it. And now I watch from above. We walk the same path, check the same points, maintain the same vigil. The foundation hasn't cracked. The house stands solid. Whatever was being contained remains contained. And every morning I wake up knowing that I am not maintaining this watch alone. Here's what I learned. Some places carry duties that outlast their owners. Some responsibilities pass from the dead to the living, not as a curse, but as a trust. If you inherit a house and strange things happen, pay attention to the pattern. If it's consistent, purposeful, measured, it might not be trying to scare you. It might be trying to teach you. My grandfather walked this house for 25 years because he understood what was needed. Now I walk it too. Not because I'm afraid of what will happen if I don't, but because something that died 130 years ago is still keeping watch, and the least I can do is keep watch alongside it. If you're hearing unexplained sounds in an old house, especially if they follow consistent patterns, don't panic. Document them. Study them. Try to understand what they're showing you. Sometimes footsteps in the ceiling aren't trying to drive you away. They're showing you how to be a good steward of the ground you're standing on. And if you inherit a house on land where people died, remember, their duty might not have ended with their deaths. If you're willing to share that duty, you might find you're not living alone. You're living alongside something that takes its responsibilities seriously. I still hear my grandfather's footsteps, or the footsteps he heard, or the footsteps we both hear, every night at 2:37 a.m. And every night I walk my own path to match. The house is quiet otherwise, peaceful, even, because we're both watching, both protecting, both doing what needs to be done. Story 3. At exactly 2:37 a.m., for the past 11 nights, someone knocked on my truck window at the same empty rest stop. My name is Carl Henderson, and I've been a long-haul truck driver for 16 years. I'm 41 years old, based out of Boise, Idaho, and I run regular routes throughout the Pacific Northwest. I've driven through every kind of weather, every time of night, through mountain passes and desert highways. I've seen animals on the road, dealt with dangerous drivers, navigated through blizzards. I'm not easily rattled. But what happened at mile marker 47 on Highway 12 in central Idaho rattled me. The route I drive most frequently runs from Boise to Missoula, Montana, a 430-mile trip that takes about 7 hours in good conditions. I usually leave Boise around 8 p.m., drive through the night, and arrive in Missoula by 3 or 4 a.m. I've made this drive at least twice a week for the past 6 years. Highway 12 is a lonely road. It cuts through the Bitterroot Mountains, following the Lochsa River for long stretches, winding through national forest land with almost no development. There are a few small towns, some campgrounds in summer, and scattered rest stops. During winter, the road can be treacherous. During late fall, like it was in November of 2023, it's usually just empty and dark. Mile marker 47 sits about halfway between Lowell and Powell Junction. There's a small rest area there, just a gravel pullout with 2 picnic tables, a pit toilet, and a historical marker about the Lewis and Clark expedition. I've stopped there dozens of times over the years to check my load, stretch my legs, or grab a quick break. On November 7th, 2023, I stopped there at 2:37 a.m. I had left Boise at 8:15 p.m., running a load of agricultural equipment to a distributor in Missoula. The weather was clear, the roads were dry, and I was making good time. I wasn't tired, but I wanted to check my straps and have a coffee before the final push through the mountains. I pulled into the rest area, parked my rig near the picnic tables, and climbed down from the cab. The temperature was around 32 degrees cold, but not freezing. No wind. The forest was silent except for the distant sound of the Lochsa River running somewhere below the road. I walked around my trailer, checking the straps on the equipment. Everything was secure. I went back to the cab, poured coffee from my thermos, and sat in the driver's seat with the door open, looking out at the dark forest. That's when I heard the footsteps. Not on the road, not in the gravel, on the passenger side of my truck. Steady footsteps walking along the length of my trailer, from the back toward the cab. Boot steps on pavement, clear and deliberate. I leaned forward and looked in my passenger side mirror. I couldn't see anyone. The footsteps continued, getting closer. I set down my coffee and waited. The footsteps reached the cab and stopped. Then 3 sharp knocks on the passenger window. Distinct, purposeful knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I looked at the window. Nobody there, just my reflection and the dark forest beyond. "Hello?" I called out. "Someone need help?" No response. I waited 30 seconds, then climbed down from the cab and walked around to the passenger side. Nobody. I looked at the ground with my flashlight. No footprints in the dirt at the roadside. No sign anyone had been there. I checked the entire rest area. Empty. My truck was the only vehicle. The forest was silent. I got back in the cab, closed both doors, and locked them. I told myself it was an animal, maybe a deer walking close to the trailer, hooves on pavement sounding like boots. Maybe the knocking was a branch hitting the window in a gust of wind I hadn't noticed. I finished my coffee and drove away. I reached Missoula by 4:30 a.m., unloaded the equipment, and thought nothing more about it, until November 9th, when I made the return trip. I left Missoula at 8 p.m., empty trailer, heading back to Boise. I reached mile marker 47 at approximately 2:35 a.m. I wasn't planning to stop, but as I approached the rest area, my truck began pulling slightly to the right. The steering felt off, not dangerous, but noticeable. I pulled into the rest area to check for a tire problem. I parked in the same spot I'd used 2 nights earlier, grabbed my flashlight, and walked around the truck. All the tires looked fine, pressure seemed normal, I couldn't find anything wrong. I was standing at the rear of the trailer, examining the right side tires, when I heard footsteps behind me, on the gravel, coming from the direction of the picnic tables. I turned around. Nobody there. The footsteps stopped. I pointed my flashlight toward the picnic tables. Empty. I swept the beam across the rest area. Nothing moved. I walked back toward the cab, flashlight in one hand, tire iron in the other, not because I felt threatened, but because something felt wrong. When I reached the driver's side door, I stopped and listened. Footsteps again. This time on the passenger side of the truck, walking from the back toward the front. Same as 2 nights ago. Same pace. Same sound. I walked quickly around the front of the truck to the passenger side. The footsteps stopped the moment I came around the corner. Nobody there. I stood in the cold, breathing hard, flashlight illuminating empty pavement and dark trees. Then 3 knocks on the passenger window of my cab. Knock, knock, knock. I was standing right there, 10 feet from the truck. I could see the passenger window clearly. Nobody was touching it. But I heard the knocks sharp, deliberate, unmistakable. I got in the truck, started the engine, and drove away without checking anything else. The steering issue had disappeared. I made it back to Boise by 6 a.m. and tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. But I hadn't. And it happened again on November 11th. Same route. Same time, 2:37 a.m. I deliberately tried to time my drive to pass mile marker 47 earlier, but I hit construction delays near Lowell that put me right on schedule despite my intentions. This time I didn't stop. I drove past the rest area, watching it in my mirrors. As I passed, I saw a figure standing near the picnic tables. A man, I thought. Tall, wearing dark clothing, just standing there, facing the road. I didn't slow down. I kept driving. But at exactly 2:37 a.m., according to my dashboard clock, I heard 3 knocks on my passenger window while I was driving 55 miles per hour. Windows closed, nobody visible in my mirrors or through the glass. Knock, knock, knock. I white-knuckled the steering wheel and drove faster. The knocks didn't repeat, but I absolutely knew that something was happening at mile marker 47, and it was happening to me specifically. Over the next 8 days, I made 4 more trips between Boise and Missoula. I tried changing my departure times. I tried taking alternate routes that added 2 hours to the trip. But every single time, through construction delays, traffic, weather, or pure coincidence, I ended up at mile marker 47 at exactly 2:37 a.m. And every single time, whether I stopped or not, I heard the footsteps, I heard the knocks, and I saw the figure standing in the rest area watching my truck pass. By November 19th, the 11th occurrence, I was terrified but also angry. I'm a practical man. I don't believe in ghosts, don't believe in hauntings, don't believe in supernatural bullshit. But I also couldn't deny what was happening. So on November 19th, I decided to stop deliberately. I wanted to confront whatever this was. I timed my drive carefully. I left Missoula at 7:45 p.m., drove at exactly the speed limit, and pulled into the mile marker 47 rest area at 2:35 a.m. I parked my truck, grabbed my high-powered flashlight and my phone, and waited. At 2:36 a.m., I got out of the cab. The temperature was 28 degrees. No wind. The forest was absolutely silent. No river sound, no animal noises, nothing. The silence felt wrong, oppressive. I stood next to my truck and waited. At exactly 2:37 a.m., I heard the footsteps. They started at the back of my trailer and walked forward along the passenger side. Same as always. Deliberate. Measured. Boot, steps on pavement. I walked around the front of the truck to intercept them. The footsteps stopped when I turned the corner. Nobody there. I shined my flashlight on the pavement. No footprints, no disturbance. Just empty road. Then the knocks came. 3 sharp impacts on my passenger window. I was standing right there, looking at the window. Nobody touched it. But I heard the knocks clearly, and I saw the glass vibrate slightly with each impact. "Who are you?" I shouted into the darkness. "What do you want?" No response. The forest remained silent. I turned slowly, sweeping my flashlight across the rest area. That's when I saw him clearly for the first time. The figure I'd been seeing in my mirrors. He was standing near the pit toilet, maybe 40 feet from my truck. A man, tall, maybe 6'3" or 6'4". He wore dark pants, a dark jacket, and work boots. His face was shadowed, but I could see he was looking directly at me. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, watching. "Do you need help?" I called out. My voice sounded too loud in the silence. The figure raised his right hand slowly and pointed, not at me, past me, toward the forest on the opposite side of the rest area. I followed the direction of his pointing finger. My flashlight beam swept across the tree line. At first, I saw nothing. Then I noticed something wrong with one of the trees about 20 feet into the forest. There was a shape hanging from a branch. Something dark. Something that swayed slightly even though there was no wind. I took a step toward the forest, then stopped. Every instinct told me not to go into those trees. Not at night. Not alone. Not with that figure watching me. I looked back toward the pit toilet. The figure was gone. Just empty space where he'd been standing. I turned back to the forest. The hanging shape was still there, visible in my flashlight beam. It looked like a bag, or a bundle, or a body. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. No signal. I was in the middle of national forest land, miles from the nearest cell tower. I'd have to drive to find service. But I couldn't leave without knowing what I'd seen. If there was a body in those trees, if someone needed help, I had to check. I walked slowly toward the tree line, flashlight raised. The hanging shape became clearer as I approached. It was a backpack, a dark-colored hiking backpack, hanging from a broken branch about 8 feet off the ground. I stopped at the edge of the trees. The backpack swayed gently, as if it had just been hung there. But the branch it was attached to was old and weathered, the bark worn away where the strap had rubbed against it. This backpack had been here for a long time. I heard footsteps behind me. On the gravel, deliberate, approaching. I spun around. The figure was walking toward me from the direction of my truck. Not running, walking. Slow, measured steps. His face was still shadowed, but as he got closer, I could see he was wearing a park ranger uniform, or something that had been a park ranger uniform once. The fabric was faded, damaged. He stopped about 10 feet from me. We stood in silence, looking at each other. Up close, I could see his face was pale, his eyes dark and sunken. He looked exhausted, sad. "Is that your backpack?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded slowly. "What happened to you?" He raised his hand again and pointed, this time toward the forest behind me, deeper into the trees. I turned and looked. In the distance, maybe 50 yards into the forest, I could see something reflecting my flashlight beam. Metal. A vehicle. "You need me to go look?" I asked. He nodded again. I don't know why I did what I did next. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to get in my truck and drive away. But something about the way he stood there, pointing, waiting, something about the sadness in his posture made me believe he wasn't trying to hurt me. He was trying to show me something. I walked into the forest. The ground was uneven, covered in fallen branches and undergrowth. I had to move slowly, sweeping my flashlight back and forth to avoid tripping. The figure didn't follow. He stayed at the tree line, watching. The metal shape grew larger as I approached. It was a vehicle, an old Jeep Cherokee, dark green, partially hidden by overgrowth and fallen trees. The driver's side door was open. The windows were covered in dirt and debris. I reached the Jeep and shined my flashlight inside. The interior was filled with leaves and forest decay. But on the dashboard, partially covered by debris, was a ranger badge. And in the passenger seat, beneath layers of decomposed organic matter, I could see bones. Human bones. A skeleton, still wearing the remnants of a park ranger uniform. I backed away from the Jeep, my flashlight shaking. I turned and ran back toward the rest area, crashing through undergrowth, breathing hard. When I broke through the tree line, the figure was still there, standing in the same spot. I stopped, trying to catch my breath. "How long have you been out here?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just looked at me with those dark, sad eyes, then turned and walked toward the historical marker near the picnic tables. He stopped in front of it and pointed at the plaque. I walked over, shining my flashlight on the metal plate. It was a standard highway historical marker describing Lewis and Clark's journey through this area in 1805. But at the bottom, in smaller text, there was an additional note. This rest area is dedicated to Ranger Thomas Mitchell, who disappeared while on patrol in this area in October 1998. 1998, 25 years ago. I looked up from the plaque. The figure, Thomas Mitchell, was standing a few feet away, watching me. He nodded slowly, as if confirming what I'd just read. "You've been trying to get someone to find you," I said. "For 25 years. He nodded again. "Why me? Why now?" He raised his hand and tapped his wrist where a watch would be. Then he held up both hands. Fingers spread. 10. He did it again. 20. Then he held up 5 fingers. 25. 25 years. Some kind of anniversary. Some kind of deadline. You needed to be found before. I trailed off. I didn't know what happened after 25 years. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Maybe his ability to manifest, to knock on windows, to show himself, maybe it was fading. He pointed at me, then pointed toward the road. "Go. Tell someone." I nodded. "I'll call it in. I'll make sure they find you, I promise." He looked at me for a long moment, then smiled. It was a sad smile, but genuine. He raised his hand in a small wave, then turned and walked toward the forest. With each step, he became more transparent. By the time he reached the tree line, I could see through him. By the time he entered the forest, he was gone. I stood in the empty rest area, shaking from cold and adrenaline. Then I got in my truck, drove until I found cell service, and called 911. I told the dispatcher I'd found what I believed were human remains in the forest near mile marker 47. I gave them the coordinates, described the location of the Jeep, and waited on the side of the road until the county sheriff arrived. The sheriff's department sent a team into the forest. They found the Jeep exactly where I'd described it. They found the remains. And they confirmed the identity through dental records. Thomas Mitchell, park ranger, reported missing on October 24th, 1998, while conducting a routine patrol of Highway 12. The official report concluded that Mitchell had pulled off the road to investigate something in the forest, possibly a poaching incident or illegal dumping, and had become disoriented or injured. His Jeep had gotten stuck in rough terrain. Unable to hike out due to injuries, he died of exposure. The wreck had been hidden by seasonal vegetation and fallen trees, invisible from the road. For 25 years, nobody had found him. I didn't tell the sheriff about the figure I'd seen. I didn't mention the knocking on my window or the footsteps I'd heard 11 nights in a row. I just said I'd stopped to check my truck and noticed something reflective in the forest. They thanked me for the discovery. They said Mitchell's family had been searching for closure for 2.5 decades. Now they could finally bury him properly. I've made the Boise to Missoula run 14 times since November 19th. I always pass mile marker 47 around 2:37 a.m. It's just the natural timing of the route. But I don't hear footsteps anymore. I don't hear knocking. And when I look at the rest area as I drive past, I don't see anyone standing there. Thomas Mitchell got what he needed. Someone finally found him. Someone finally brought him home. And whatever kept him tied to that rest area for 25 years finally let him go. Here's what I learned. If you experience the same inexplicable event repeatedly, especially at the same time and place, pay attention. It might not be random. It might not be your imagination. It might be someone trying desperately to communicate the only way they can. Ghosts, if that's what we want to call them, aren't always trying to scare you. Sometimes they're trying to get your attention because they need help. They need someone to see them, to hear them, to do something they can't do themselves. If you're a driver and you experience something strange at the same location multiple times, don't ignore it. Make note of the time, the place, the pattern. Research the area. Look for missing person reports, unsolved cases, historical incidents. There might be a reason you're experiencing what you're experiencing. And if a ghost asks you for help, if they point you towards something, show you something, lead you somewhere, consider following. I know it sounds crazy. I know it goes against every self-preservation instinct. But Thomas Mitchell stood at that rest area for 25 years, knocking on windows, trying to get someone to look into the forest. I'm glad I was the one who finally listened. If you drive long-haul routes, especially through remote areas, stay alert. Pay attention to patterns. And if someone or something is trying to show you something, don't be afraid to look. You might be the answer to a question that's been waiting decades to be asked. Story 4. The voicemail is time-stamped 3 hours after we buried her, and it was definitely my wife's voice. My name is Nathan Price, and my wife Emily died on March 14th, 2024. She was 36 years old. We'd been married for 8 years. She died in a car accident on Interstate 5 near Salem, Oregon. A semi-truck crossed the median during a rainstorm and hit her head-on. She was pronounced dead at the scene. I'm telling you this up front because what happened afterward doesn't make sense without understanding how sudden it was, how final. There was no question about her death. I identified her body. I made the funeral arrangements. I watched them lower her casket into the ground at Riverview Cemetery in Portland on March 17th at 2 p.m. At 5:07 p.m. that same day, my phone rang. Emily's number. I was sitting in our living room, still wearing my funeral suit, staring at nothing. When I saw her name on the caller ID, my brain simply couldn't process it. I answered, "Hello?" No one spoke. I could hear background noise, faint, indistinct, maybe wind, maybe static. Then the call disconnected. I stared at the phone. I told myself it was a pocket dial from her phone, which had been in her purse at the time of the accident. The police had returned her personal effects to me 3 days earlier. Her phone had been damaged, cracked screen, wouldn't power on, but maybe it had somehow activated, somehow made a call. Except her phone was sitting on my kitchen counter, still broken, still dead. I checked my call log. Incoming call from Emily's number. 5:07 p.m. Duration 13 seconds. I checked her phone. No outgoing call in the log. The phone was completely non-functional. I sat on the couch trying to rationalize it. Cell phone systems malfunction. Numbers get spoofed. Lines get crossed. There had to be an explanation. Then my voicemail notification appeared. One new message, received at 5:07 p.m. I played it. Nathan. Emily's voice. Quiet, slightly distorted, but unmistakably hers. Nathan, I don't know where I am. Everything's gray. I can't find the way out. Can you hear me? Please, I need you to. The message cut off. 22 seconds total. I played it again and again and again. I must have listened to it 50 times that night, sitting alone in the dark, phone pressed to my ear, trying to convince myself it wasn't real, wasn't her, couldn't possibly be her. But it was her voice. I knew my wife's voice. The slight upward inflection on certain words, the way she said my name, the breathing pattern. It was Emily. At 3 a.m., unable to sleep, I called my brother James. He lived in Seattle, hadn't been able to make it to the funeral due to work. I played him the voicemail over the phone without explaining what it was. Is that Emily? He asked immediately. You recognize her voice? Of course I recognize her voice. Where'd this recording come from? I told him. About the call, about the timestamp, about the fact that it came 3 hours after we buried her. There was a long silence. Then, Nathan, you need to delete that message. You need to delete it right now and never listen to it again. Why? Because grief does things to your mind, he said gently. You're hearing what you want to hear. You're finding patterns where there aren't any. That message is probably old, probably got delayed in the system somehow, and you're torturing yourself by... It's not old, I interrupted. She says, I don't know where I am. She says everything's gray. She's asking for help, James. She sounds scared. Nathan, I know how this sounds. I know. But I also know my wife's voice, and that message was left today, after her funeral. James drove down the next morning. He arrived at my house at 11 a.m. looking exhausted and worried. I played him the message again, this time on speakerphone so we could both hear it clearly. He listened in silence, his expression growing more troubled with each repetition. When I finally stopped playing it, he rubbed his face and sighed. Okay, he said. That's definitely Emily's voice. I can't deny that, but Nathan, Emily is dead. We both know that. Whatever this is, it can't actually be her. Then what is it? I don't know. A glitch, a coincidence, someone's idea of a sick joke. But it's not Emily calling you from beyond the grave. I wanted to believe him. I wanted there to be a rational explanation. But that night, at 5:07 p.m., exactly 24 hours after the first call, my phone rang again. Emily's number. I answered immediately. Emily? Static. Faint background noise. Then her voice. Clearer this time. Nathan, please. I'm lost. Everything's the same color. I can't find the edges. I can't find the door. You have to help me. Emily, where are you? What do you mean you're lost? I don't. I don't remember dying. I remember the rain. I remember headlights. Then everything went gray. I've been walking, but I can't find. Nathan, I can't find the way out. Out of where? I don't know. Her voice rose, panicked. Everything looks the same. Gray walls, gray floor, gray ceiling. No windows, no doors. I've been walking for I don't know how long. Hours, days. Please, you have to. The line went dead. I immediately tried calling her number back. It went straight to a generic voicemail. The number you have reached is not available. Please try your call again later. James was still at my house, staying to help me sort through Emily's things. He'd heard my side of the conversation. When I hung up, he looked pale. You heard her? I asked. He nodded. I heard you talking to someone. I couldn't hear the other side. I checked my phone. Another voicemail. I played it on speaker. Emily's voice filled my living room. Nathan, please, I'm lost. Everything's the same color. I can't find the edges. I can't find the door. You have to help me. The rest of the conversation I'd heard wasn't on the recording, just that initial statement. But I'd heard her respond to my questions. I'd heard her panic. I'd heard her ask for help. This isn't possible, James whispered. Nathan, this can't be happening. But it is happening. Over the next week, Emily called every day at 5:07 p.m. Every single call, she sounded more distressed, more desperate. She described being trapped in a gray space with no distinguishing features. No light source, but not dark. No temperature, not hot, not cold. No sounds except her footsteps and her voice. I've tried everything, she said on March 21st. I've tried walking in straight lines. I've tried following the walls. But the walls never end, Nathan. I walk for hours, and the walls never end. There are no corners, no doors, no windows, just endless gray. Emily, you died. Do you understand that? You were in an accident. I know, she said quietly. I remember now. The truck, the impact, the pain. Then, this. I thought this was death. I thought everyone just ended up in a gray room forever. But that can't be right. There has to be something else. There has to be a way out. I don't know how to help you, I said, my voice breaking. I don't know what this is, or how to reach you, or find out, she said urgently. Please, Nathan, research this. Ask people. Find someone who knows about what happens after, about where we go, about why I'm stuck. The line went dead. I spent the next 3 days researching. I read about near-death experiences, afterlife theories, religious doctrines, paranormal phenomena. I contacted mediums, psychics, paranormal investigators. Most of them were obvious frauds. A few seemed genuinely interested, but admitted they had no explanation for what I was experiencing. On March 24th, I contacted Dr. Sarah Chen, a professor of religious studies at Portland State University who specialized in cross-cultural death practices and afterlife beliefs. I explained the situation as clinically as I could, playing her the voicemails over the phone. She listened in silence, then asked me to come to her office. We met the next day. She had me play all the voicemails I'd recorded. There were 11 by that point. She listened to each one carefully, taking notes. "Mr. Price," she said when we finished, "I need to be very honest with you. What you're describing doesn't fit any established framework I'm familiar with. Most religious traditions that include an afterlife describe it as a specific place: heaven, hell, purgatory, various realms. Some describe a transitional state, but those are usually temporary and guided. What your wife describes sounds more like containment, isolation. What does that mean?" "I don't know," she admitted, "but I have a colleague who might. Dr. Michael Torres at UC Berkeley. He studies what he calls trapped consciousness phenomena, cases where individuals claim to experience awareness after clinical death, often in states of confusion or disorientation." She gave me Dr. Torres's contact information. I called him that afternoon and explained everything. He asked me to email him the voicemail recordings, which I did. He called me back within an hour. "Mr. Price, these recordings are extraordinary. If they're genuine, and I'm not saying they're not, but I have to maintain scientific skepticism, they represent the clearest documentation I've ever encountered of post-mortem consciousness attempting communication." "Can you help her?" I asked. "Can you help me understand what's happening?" "I can try, but I need more information. The next time she calls, I need you to ask her specific questions." "Can you do that?" "What questions?" He sent me a list via email. Questions about the space she was in, about her physical sensations, about her mental state, about any changes she'd noticed. He wanted detailed descriptions, specific measurements if possible, any patterns or variations in her environment. That evening at 5:07 p.m., Emily called. I had Dr. Torres on a conference line, listening silently. "Emily," I said, "I need to ask you some questions. I'm trying to help. I'm talking to someone who might understand what's happening to you." "Okay," she said. Her voice sounded exhausted. "Ask." I went through Dr. Torres's questions methodically. Emily answered as best she could. The space was uniformly gray. She couldn't distinguish walls from floor from ceiling except by touch. The surface felt smooth, slightly cool, like polished stone. She couldn't measure the dimensions because the space seemed to shift. Sometimes she'd walk for what felt like hours. Sometimes the far wall would appear after just a few steps. There was no hunger, no thirst, no need to sleep. But she felt fatigue, mental exhaustion from the endlessness, from the sameness. "Have you encountered anyone else?" Dr. Torres had me ask. "No," Emily said. "I'm completely alone. I've screamed for help. No one answers. Nathan, I'm so afraid I'm going to be here forever." "You're not," I said firmly. "We're going to figure this out. We're going to get you out." After the call ended, Dr. Torres was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "Mr. Price, I'm going to propose something that will sound impossible, but based on Emily's descriptions and the pattern of her calls, I believe she's experiencing what some theoretical frameworks call a liminal trap, a state between life and death where consciousness becomes stuck due to sudden traumatic death without psychological preparation. How do we get her out?" That's the difficult part. In theoretical models, the trapped consciousness needs something to orient toward, a focal point, a direction. Right now, Emily is in an undifferentiated space with no reference points. She needs something to guide her toward whatever comes next. How do I provide that? You can't. Not directly, but she might be able to create it herself if she understands what she needs to do. I'm going to send you a protocol, a set of instructions for Emily. It's based on meditation practices used by Tibetan monks to navigate the bardo, the transitional state between death and rebirth. I've adapted it for someone in Emily's situation. He sent the protocol that night. It was essentially a guided visualization instructions for Emily to create a doorway in her mind, to imagine light beyond it, to walk toward that light with intention and purpose. The next day, March 26th, Emily called at 5:07 p.m. I explained the protocol carefully, reading Dr. Torres's instructions word for word. You want me to imagine a door? She asked, skeptical. Yes, and light beyond it, and to walk toward that light believing it will take you somewhere beyond this gray space. Nathan, I've tried imagining things. I've tried visualizing. Nothing changes. This place doesn't respond to what I think or want. Please try, I said. What's the alternative? Staying there forever? She was quiet for a long moment. Then, okay, I'll try. But Nathan, if this doesn't work, if I'm still here tomorrow, I don't know how much longer I can. It will work, I interrupted. It has to work. The line went dead. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, phone in hand, waiting for 5:07 p.m. the next day. When the time came, the phone didn't ring. 5:10 p.m., no call. 5:15 p.m., nothing. 5:30 p.m., silence. I called Emily's number. Generic voicemail. I called again. Same result. I called Dr. Torres. She's not calling. She always calls at 5:07. She hasn't missed a single day in 2 weeks. That could be a good sign, he said carefully. It might mean she found her way out. Or it might mean something else. Something worse. Mr. Price, there is no worse than being trapped in liminal space. If she stopped calling, it's because something changed. Let's hope it changed for the better. I sat by my phone for hours. No call came. The next day, no call. The day after, nothing. A week passed. 2 weeks. The calls had stopped. I tried to convince myself Dr. Torres was right, that Emily had found her way out, moved on to whatever comes after the gray space. But I couldn't shake the fear that something else had happened, that she'd given up, that she'd stopped trying to reach me. On April 14th, 1 month after Emily's death, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. The handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten message. Thank you for helping me find the door. The light was exactly where you said it would be. I love you. I'm okay now. E. The handwriting was Emily's. I held the letter, hand shaking, reading it over and over. There was no logical explanation for how this letter existed. Emily was dead. She'd been cremated. Her ashes were in an urn on my mantel. She couldn't have written this letter. But the handwriting was hers. The phrasing was hers. The signature was hers. I called Dr. Torres. He asked me to scan the letter and send it to him. When he called back, his voice was subdued. I've compared the handwriting to samples from Emily's life, the signature on her driver's license, notes from her workplace. It's a match, or a very skilled forgery. You think someone forged this letter? Why? Who would do that? I don't know, he admitted. But, Mr. Price, I think you need to consider the possibility that what you experienced was real, that Emily was trapped in some kind of transitional state, that she reached out to you, and that you helped her escape. That letter might be her final communication, her way of saying goodbye and thanking you. I kept the letter. I keep it still, in a frame on my bedside table. I read it every night before I sleep. I never received another call from Emily's number. The voicemails are still saved on my phone, 11 messages, timestamped from March 17th to March 26th, documenting her progression from confusion to fear to desperation. I've saved them to multiple backups, encrypted and protected, because they're proof. Proof of what exactly, I'm still not certain, but proof nonetheless. Here's what I learned. Death might not be as simple as we think. There might be spaces between here and wherever we go next, spaces where consciousness can become trapped, confused, lost. And if someone you love ends up in one of those spaces, they might find a way to reach out. If you receive a call from someone who's died, don't immediately dismiss it as impossible. Don't delete the voicemail without listening. Don't convince yourself it's your imagination or a technical glitch. Listen, Pay attention. Try to help. Because maybe, just maybe, they're not calling to haunt you. They're calling because they're lost and you're the only person they know how to reach. You might be their only connection to the world they left behind, and their only hope of finding the way forward. Emily found her door. She found her light. She moved on. But what if I hadn't listened? What if I dismissed the calls, deleted the voicemails, convinced myself I was hallucinating from grief? She might still be there, walking endless gray corridors, alone, forever. If someone you've lost tries to contact you, please listen. Try to help. They might need you more than they ever did in life. And if you're experiencing something you can't explain, something that seems impossible, don't suffer alone. Talk to someone, research, find experts who study these phenomena. There are people who take these experiences seriously, who might be able to help. I don't know if I'll ever understand exactly what happened. I don't know if Emily was really trapped in some liminal space, or if the whole thing was an elaborate grief hallucination my mind constructed to cope with her death. But I have the voicemails, I have the letter, and I have the fact that the call stopped after we tried Dr. Torres's protocol. That has to mean something. If you found this story helpful or meaningful, please subscribe and share it. Leave a comment if you've experienced anything similar, contact from someone who's passed, messages that seem impossible, phone calls that defy explanation. You're not alone. These experiences happen more often than people admit. And remember, not everyone who dies finds their way immediately. Some get lost. Some need help. If you're the person they reach out to, don't turn away. Listen. Try to help. You might be their only hope. Story 5. On October 19th, every resident of Maple Street saw the same runner pass their window at dawn. The road only has one entrance, and nobody ever saw him leave. My name is Derek Huang, and I've lived on Maple Street in Ashland, Oregon for 6 years. It's a quiet residential street, 12 houses total, all single-family homes built in the 1950s and 60s. The street is shaped like a cul-de-sac with one entrance from Oak Avenue and a turnaround circle at the end. No through traffic, no shortcuts. If you're on Maple Street, it's because you live there or you're visiting someone who does. The street is tree-lined, peaceful, suburban, in the way small Oregon towns are suburban. Everyone knows everyone. We have a neighborhood watch sign at the entrance, though we've never had crime worth watching for. People wave to each other. Kids play in front yards. It's the kind of place where you notice strangers. On October 19th, 2023, everyone on Maple Street noticed the same stranger. I woke up at 6:15 a.m., same as I do every weekday. I'm a high school math teacher, and I like to have coffee and breakfast before my 7:30 departure for work. I was standing in my kitchen waiting for the coffee maker to finish, looking out the window that faces the street. That's when I saw the jogger. He was running down Maple Street from the direction of the turnaround circle, heading toward the Oak Avenue entrance. Male, maybe late 20s or early 30s, wearing a gray hoodie, black running pants, and white running shoes. Average height, average build. Nothing remarkable except that I didn't recognize him, and I knew everyone who lived on our street. He ran with steady, measured strides. His pace was consistent, not sprinting, not leisurely, but purposeful. As he passed my house, I noticed he was looking straight ahead, not at the houses or the yards, just focused on the road ahead of him. I watched him run past. He continued down the street toward the entrance and disappeared from my view as he rounded the slight curve near the Kowalski house. I assumed he'd turn onto Oak Avenue and continue his run through the neighborhood. Lots of people jogged through the area in the mornings. I finished my coffee, got ready for work, and left my house at 7:28 a.m. As I was backing out of my driveway, my neighbor, Margaret Chen, flagged me down. She was standing at the end of her driveway, looking agitated. I rolled down my window. "Morning, Margaret. Everything okay?" "Derek, did you see that jogger this morning? The one in the gray hoodie?" "Yeah, I saw him. Around 6:15 or so. He ran past my house, heading toward Oak Avenue." "What time exactly?" she asked. "Maybe 6:17? 6:18? Why?" She looked troubled. I saw him at 6:23, running in the same direction, same outfit, same pace. But Derek had been standing at my window since 6 a.m. watching for the newspaper delivery. I never saw him run past my house the first time. He just appeared in front of the Morrison house and ran past mine. Maybe you looked away for a moment. I didn't, she interrupted. I was watching the street continuously. He didn't run down the street. He just appeared, partway down, and ran toward the exit. I didn't know what to say to that. Maybe he came out of one of the yards, cutting through. Whose yard? She asked. The Morrisons' fence is locked. The Patels don't have a side gate. There's no way to access the street between houses without going through someone's backyard, and I would have seen that. I promised to think about it and drove to work. The conversation bothered me, but I pushed it aside. Busy teaching day, papers to grade, parent conference after school. I didn't get home until 5:30 p.m. When I pulled onto Maple Street, I noticed several of my neighbors standing in a cluster near the turnaround circle. Margaret Chen, Bob Morrison, Lisa Patel, and old Mr. Kowalski from the corner house. They were talking animatedly, gesturing at the road. I parked and walked over. What's going on? We all saw him, Lisa said immediately. The jogger, the one in the gray hoodie. Everyone on this street saw him this morning. So? I said. Someone went for a run through the neighborhood. That happens. At the exact same time, Margaret added. We've been comparing. Every single person who saw him between 6:15 and 6:30 a.m. But Derek, we all saw him at different points on the street, running in the same direction, and nobody saw him more than once. Bob Morrison, a retired engineer who was meticulous about details, had been taking notes on a pad of paper. I saw him at 6:19 a.m., running past my house toward the entrance. Margaret saw him at 6:23. Lisa saw him at 6:26. Mr. Kowalski saw him at 6:28. All of us saw him running from the turnaround circle toward Oak Avenue. Okay, I said slowly. So he did a loop, ran around the circle, and there's only one entrance, Mr. Kowalski interrupted. His voice was firm despite his age. I've lived on this street for 42 years. There's one way in and one way out. If he ran down the street toward Oak Avenue, he would have had to run back up the street to loop around again, but nobody saw him running toward the turnaround. We all only saw him running away from it. I looked at each of them. They were serious. These weren't people prone to hysteria or ghost stories. Margaret was a retired accountant. Bob was an engineer. Lisa was a physical therapist. Mr. Kowalski was a former city councilman. So what are you suggesting? I asked. I'm not suggesting anything, Bob said. I'm stating facts. Multiple people saw the same person, wearing the same clothing, running in the same direction, at different times, without anyone seeing him double back or loop around. That doesn't make sense, according to the physical layout of this street. Maybe he lives on the street, I offered. Maybe he came out of his house, ran to the end, and we saw him at different points on his way back. I've knocked on every door, Margaret said. Everyone's home, all 12 houses. Nobody knows who he is. Nobody is missing a family member or has a guest staying with them. And Derek, everyone who saw him this morning said the same thing. He appeared midway down their view of the street, ran past their house, and disappeared from sight. Nobody saw where he came from or where he went. That evening, we gathered at Bob Morrison's house, all the adults from Maple Street. We compared our experiences. The pattern was consistent and inexplicable. 6:15 a.m. I saw the jogger run past my house, house number 3, from the entrance. 6:17 a.m. The Reyes family, house number 4, saw him run past. 6:19 a.m. Bob Morrison, house number 5, saw him. 6:21 a.m. The Patel family, house number 7, saw him. 6:23 a.m. Margaret Chen, house number 8, saw him. 6:26 a.m. Lisa Patel, house number 9, saw him. 6:28 a.m. Mr. Kowalski, house number 12, the corner house, saw him. Every sighting was moving in the same direction from the turnaround circle toward the Oak Avenue entrance. Nobody saw him running the opposite direction. Nobody saw him turn around. Nobody saw him come from Oak Avenue or exit onto Oak Avenue. It's like he was running the same route simultaneously at different times, Lisa said. Or like we were all watching a recording but seeing different parts of it. That's not possible, Bob said flatly, but he looked troubled. We decided to test it the next morning. We would all watch the street during the same time, windows 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. We'd position ourselves at windows, note exact times, and compare observations. October 20th, 6 a.m. I stood at my kitchen window with my phone, ready to record. The street was empty. Dawn light filtered through the trees. Nothing moved. 6:15 a.m. came and went. No jogger. 6:30 a.m. Still nothing. At 7 a.m. I received a group text from Bob Morrison. Anyone see anything? Responses came in quickly. Nobody had seen the jogger. The street had been empty all morning. We gathered again that evening, confused and slightly relieved. Maybe it had been a one-time event, some strange coincidence we'd never fully understand but could move past. But on October 21st, the jogger appeared again. Same time window. Same gray hoodie. Same black pants. Same white shoes. Same steady, measured pace. This time, Bob Morrison and I coordinated. We stood at our respective windows, his house being 2 down from mine, and maintained cell phone contact. At 6:16 a.m., I saw the jogger run past my house, heading toward the entrance. I texted Bob immediately, just past my house. At 6:18 a.m., Bob texted back, just past my house, same direction. We'd both seen him within 2 minutes of each other, but he had covered distance that should have taken 30 seconds at his running pace, and neither of us had seen him during the intervening time. I ran outside immediately after he passed my window, trying to catch sight of him on the street, but the street was empty. No jogger, no sound of footsteps, nothing. This continued every morning for a week, October 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th. Every morning between 6:15 and 6:30 a.m., the jogger appeared. Different residents would see him at different times, but always running the same direction, always in the same outfit, always at a measured pace. On October 27th, Margaret Chen did something bold. When she saw the jogger approaching her house at 6:23 a.m., she ran outside and stood in the middle of the street, directly in his path. He ran straight at me, she told us that evening, visibly shaken. I waved my arms, I shouted. He didn't slow down, didn't change direction, didn't acknowledge me at all. And when he got within maybe 6 feet of me, he just disappeared, mid-stride, just gone. She showed us video from her phone. The footage showed her standing in the street, shouting at something we couldn't see on camera. Then she jumped backward, startled, and looked around in confusion. The jogger wasn't visible in her video at all. Our cameras can't see him, Bob Morrison concluded. I've checked my doorbell camera, my security cameras. They show empty street during the times we're all seeing him run past. Whatever he is, he's not showing up on digital recording. What do you mean, whatever he is? Lisa asked quietly. Are we saying this is a ghost? Nobody wanted to use that word. But we were all thinking it. On October 28th, I decided to research the street's history. I went to the Ashland Historical Society and asked about Maple Street, specifically about any deaths or significant events associated with the area. The archivist, an elderly woman named Patricia, pulled several files. Maple Street was developed in 1953, she said. 12 houses, all built within 2 years. Pretty standard post-war suburban development. Let me see. No major incidents reported. No fires, no violent crimes, no wait. She pulled out a newspaper clipping from November 1962. There was a missing person case. A young man named David Brennan, age 28. He lived on Maple Street with his wife. Went out for a morning jog on October 19th, 1962, and never came home. My blood went cold. October 19th? Yes. Police searched the area extensively. No body was ever found, no evidence of foul play. He just disappeared during his morning run. The case was never solved. Do you have a photo of him? She found one in the file, a newspaper photo from the missing person report. I stared at it. Gray hoodie, or what would have been called a gray sweatshirt in 1962. Dark pants, light-colored shoes, the same build, the same general appearance as the jogger we'd been seeing. What house did he live in? I asked. Patricia checked the file. 1723 Maple Street. That would be house number 9, I think. The Patel residence currently. Lisa Patel's house. The house where the jogger seemed to run past consistently around 6:26 a.m. I took photos of the file and returned to Maple Street. That evening I shared everything with the neighbors. We looked at David Brennan's photo in silence. That's him, Margaret said quietly. That's the jogger we've been seeing. But why? Lisa asked. Why would he be running the same route 61 years later? Why every October 19th? Mr. Kowalski, who'd been silent throughout most of our meetings, finally spoke up. My father told me about David Brennan. I was young when it happened, but I remember the search parties. They looked everywhere, the woods, the reservoir, neighboring towns. My father always said David ran toward Oak Avenue and just vanished, like he ran off the edge of the world. I think he's still running that route, Bob said. I think on October 19th, 1962, David Brennan went for his morning jog and something happened. Something we don't understand. And every October 19th since, he runs the same route, trying to complete a run he never finished. But why can we all see him? I asked. Why does he appear to different people at different times? I think we're seeing different moments of his run, Margaret said slowly. Like his entire route from that morning is playing out over and over, and depending on where we are and when we look, we catch different segments of it. He's not running through our time, he's running through his own time, October 19th, 1962, and we're glimpsing it. The explanation felt both impossible and somehow right. On October 29th, we decided to wait at the turnaround circle, the point where David Brennan seemed to begin his run each morning. All 12 households were represented. We stood in the cold pre-dawn darkness, watching. At 6:14 a.m., the jogger appeared, not running toward us from elsewhere, just appearing. One moment the street was empty, the next moment he was there, mid-stride, running toward the Oak Avenue entrance. We watched him run past each house in sequence. As he moved, I realized we could track his progress, by which residents could see him. When he was passing house 3, only I could see him clearly. When he reached house 5, Bob Morrison saw him while I started to lose sight of him. The jogger was visible to each resident only when he was directly in their line of sight, as if he existed only in the specific space and moment of his original run. He reached the approximate position of the Oak Avenue entrance, though the street configuration had changed since 1962 and simply faded from view. Mid-stride, he became translucent, then transparent, then gone. We stood in silence, processing what we'd witnessed. He's looking for the way home, Mr. Kowalski said softly. He's trying to finish his run and get back to his house. But the street has changed. The entrance isn't where it used to be. The landmarks are different. He's lost. Can we help him? Lisa asked. How? Bob replied. He's running a route from 61 years ago. He can't see us. He can't hear us. He's not really here in any way we can interact with. But Margaret had an idea. His house was on our street. Your house, Lisa. What if we create a path for him? Something visible from where he's running. Something that might guide him to where his house used to be. Over the next few days, we worked together on a plan. We researched the exact layout of Maple Street in 1962, comparing it to the current configuration. The street had been repaved, the entrance had been moved slightly, some trees had been removed or planted, but the houses were in the same positions. On November 4th, we placed reflective markers, small, discrete solar lights along the path from the current entrance to Lisa's house, following the route David Brennan would have taken in 1962. We weren't sure it would work. We weren't even sure if he could see anything from our time, but we had to try. On November 5th, which fell on a Sunday, we gathered again at dawn. We watched as David Brennan appeared at 6:14 a.m. and began his run. When he reached the point where he usually faded from view, He hesitated. He slowed his pace slightly, looking around as if noticing something different. Then he changed direction. Instead of running straight toward where the old entrance had been, he followed the path marked by our lights. He ran toward Lisa's house, his house, 61 years ago. When he reached the driveway, he stopped. For the first time in all our observations, he stopped running. He stood in front of the house, looking at it. Then he turned and looked back down the street, as if confirming this was the right place. He raised his hand in what might have been a wave or a gesture of thanks. Then he walked up the driveway, walked, not ran, and faded from view as he reached the front door. We haven't seen him since. No more jogger at dawn. No more appearances at different times and places along the street. David Brennan found his way home. Here's what I learned. Some people who disappear don't go missing all at once. They become stuck in a specific moment, repeating it endlessly, trying to complete something they couldn't finish in life. And sometimes those of us who live in the same spaces can help them complete that journey. If you see the same stranger repeatedly in impossible circumstances, same time, same place, same clothes, pay attention. They might not be a stranger at all. They might be someone who's been trying to get home for longer than you can imagine. Research your area. Learn its history. Find out who lived there before you. You might discover that the inexplicable things you're witnessing aren't random. They're echoes of unfinished business from decades past. And if you can, help them. Leave a light on. Mark a path. Create a guide home. Because everyone deserves to complete their journey, even if that journey takes 61 years. David Brennan ran the same route every October 19th for 6 decades, trying to find his way home. Now he's found it, and Maple Street is quiet again in the mornings. But we keep the solar lights up, just in case, because if one person found their way home using our help, maybe others can too. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and share it with others. Leave a comment. If you've experienced repeated sightings of the same person in impossible circumstances, you might be witnessing someone trying to complete an unfinished journey. And remember, not everyone who's lost stays lost forever. Sometimes they just need someone to light the path home.